On today's Locked On Jayhawks, the three biggest takeaways from KU's loss over the weekend to Illinois.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Eric Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio, and you can find our show. It's called Locked On Jayhawks anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Thank you to the everydayers tuning in to each and every show. Thank you for making LOJ your first listen every day. We're getting into our three biggest takeaways from the Kansas-Illinois game, in which Kansas fell to Illinois over the weekend. We'll finish up with the top performers according to Pro Football Focus, and some interesting notes about maybe what that can tell us about, the team and moving forward. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks, before we get into those three takeaways, is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com, use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB, and you receive 20% off your first order. Okay, three biggest takeaways from KU's loss to Illinois. My biggest takeaway, and I don't know, maybe I'm just going to start with a happy one, I guess, to ease into things here. This is the best run defense of the Lance Leipold era. Now, you didn't necessarily set the highest bars when you're looking at like the first couple of years. They were better in 2022 than they were in 2021. They were better in 2023 than they were in 2022. And now they've, in my opinion, taken that next step or are going to what they're going to do. So you look at that first season, they gave up 6.1 yards per carry. They gave almost 251 rushing yards per game. You look at year two, 2022, they make a bowl game. The run defense is better. They're giving up 4.8 yards per carry. But they're still giving up 209 rushing yards per game, and that yard per carry number is so big. Then you fast forward to 2023 last year. The yard per carry goes down from 4.8 to 4.4. And the yard total goes from over 200 to 162. So still numbers that you want to get down, but you can see the improvement year in and year out. In the early going here for the 2024 season, Kansas has only given up 77 rush yards per game. They're only giving up 2.5 rush yards per carry. But, it's one thing to do it against an FCS opponent. It's another thing to do it against a power opponent, and not just a power opponent, but one who wants to rely on running the football, one who they want their identity to be running the football, and one who has been good at running the football. When you look at the KU game against Illinois, it was the least amount of yards, total yards, that KU has given up to an FBS opponent. And even that amount took some KU turnovers, took Illinois hitting some tightrope passes on the sideline that required really good catches to either stay in bounds or just to haul in the pass. As far as the running game, though, that's what I'm talking about here. That's a good running team that Illinois has. Kansas held them to 79 rushing yards. 79, that's it, on 2.3 yards per carry. I said this in the reaction show afterwards, and don't forget to check that out if you haven't already. Thank you to everydayers who already did for that. If you would have told me coming in that Kansas would have held Illinois to 2.3 yards per carry, 79 rushing yards, I would have thought they would have won by 2-3 touchdowns, to be completely honest with you. Maybe even more than that. Brett Bielema has been a coach at Wisconsin, Illinois, and Arkansas. Whether he's been at Wisconsin or he's been at Arkansas or now at Illinois, he's always had good offensive linemen. He most drafted into the NFL at this point because Nick Saban's retired. He's always had, seemingly good running backs and running games for what he has been able to do. Specifically, when you look at his time in Illinois, Brett Bielema has coached 39 games for the Fighting Illini, including the game over the weekend. They've only been held below 100 yards in 8 of them, in 8 of the 39. So, I don't know, basically 1 every 5 games. So it doesn't happen that often. That's a couple times a season. And like half of those came last season when they just didn't have the guys to make it happen as much as they have in like all the other years, including probably this year. So realistically, that number ends up being a little bit smaller. They've only been held to below 2.5 yards per carry in the Bielema era in just 5 of the 39 games. So that's basically 1 out of every 8 games. So on some seasons, only once. Other seasons, it's only happening twice per season, right? You're going up against some good defenses, good run defenses in the Big Ten. A year prior to that, they had 139 rushing yards against you in the Kansas-Illinois meeting. And that's not a huge number, but, they got to a point where they had to start passing because they got down so early. Illinois averaged 5 yards per carry in the matchup with Kansas last season. He held them below half that number in this one. And then you look at the personnel too, because there's reason that Illinois is a better running team this year than they were last year. And a big reason why is Caden Fagan. So Caden Fagan was a freshman last year, only had one carry in the game against Kansas, kind of became the lead back over the back half of the season for Illinois last year. And so far early in this year, that's kind of been the case. So Caden Fagan in his young career, he's had 6 games during his career where he's had double-digit carries, so 10 or more carries in a game, which that's not even like that huge of a number. If I wanted to go to like 15 carries, 20 carries, that'd be a whole nother thing, but just even double-digit carries. And even when he's just gotten double-digit carries, here has been Caden Fagan's rushing totals for those specific games that he's had 10 or more carries. 85 yards, 84 yards, 97 yards, 89 yards, 108 yards. Against KU, he had double-digit carries. He only had 40 yards. So Kansas did an excellent job stopping the run against a team who wants to run the football and has personnel to be good at running the football. And I think this is going to end up being the best run defense of the KU era, or the Lance Leipold era. And I kind of had suspicions that might be the case coming in. A, you've seen the progression each and every year. B, you have Cornell Wheeler and J.B. Brown to thump up the middle. You've got a good stable of defensive tackles. And even if you question, okay, there's no Austin Booker as a pass rusher, I do think they have guys at the defensive end spots who can stop the run. So I think everything's pointing to that, and that would obviously be a very positive takeaway from this game moving forward for KU. Takeaway number 2, though, we got to go to the negative side of things. Losing Andy Kotelnicki was a bigger loss than me, and I think a lot of others. I mean, I don't want to – if you might be in the camp that you knew this was going to happen all along, and more power to you if you knew that was going to kind of be the case. And I will say it still is just the second game. Like, there is a real chance that Jeff Grimes figures it out and, starts to mesh with everything KU wants to do and Jalon Daniels is good at, and the running game and getting the ball to Devin Neal more and stuff like, and Daniel Highshaw more and stuff like that. Like, there's a chance that things improve. And that would be kind of the hope moving forward, because it is just the second game of the season. Things can change very drastically in college football with 18 to 22-year-olds from the second week of the season to the 8th week of the season, right? That can absolutely be the case. But I think I kind of downplayed it. And again, I was not alone in this, that losing Andy Kotelnicki was a huge loss. He's a great offensive coordinator, and I kind of remained that way the whole time. And I thought it was a great hire for Penn State. But I thought that Kansas was going to be able to have a seamless transition because, one, you saw it in the bowl game. Like, Jim Zebrowski is calling plays, and Kansas is able to manufacture this huge bowl performance. You see the fact that, the now Nevada offensive coordinator, who was a former analyst with Matt Lubick, was in your system. Like, okay, that's just another part of the system. You bring Jeff Grimes in for the bowl practices, and he's getting to coach, or I guess be around the coaching and interpret stuff and soak in what KU is doing and add it to what he wants to do. And the idea was that he was just going to be an extension of what they were doing, just with some new concepts of what he wanted to do blended in. But it seems like it was more of a takeover than a blending, at least from the play calling that we saw in this past game. And I feel like things got downplayed a little bit. I still think Jeff Grimes is a better recruiter than Andy Kotelnicki, but Kotelnicki was more just focused on the X's and O's and the play calling and stuff like that. And I think it's even fair to question, like, this was another thing I kind of glossed over. Like, Andy Kotelnicki was coaching the tight ends. That's what Jeff Grimes is doing. Maybe it's just easy to say it's a personnel thing. Like, you had Mason Fairchild on the roster the last couple of years, and you don't on this year's roster. And also Deshaun Hanukkah, who's probably going to be the starting tight end, gets injured in spring practice, and that throws a wrench into things, certainly. But, like, the lack of tight end usage has been very notable. And honestly, even when Jared Casey and Trevor Cardell were backup tight ends for KU, it felt like they were getting used more than they are now as like the top 2 tight ends for KU. So I don't know where Grimes kind of comes into that, or Andy Kotelnicki as a position coach or as an offensive coordinator, and kind of the differences there. But I think the biggest thing to me is this. Kansas needs to call plays like their biggest strength on offense is running the football. I know they have these really good receivers, and the idea of what Jalon Daniels can be, which hasn't been this year but has been in the past, is very tantalizing. But let's not forget, they were running the football even the last couple of years more, even when Jason Bean was going off, because the best player on the offense, this is who you're calling, like, you're tailoring the plays to, in my mind, is Devin Neal. But it didn't feel like that was the case in Saturday's game to Illinois. It felt like it was being tailored to. And Jalon Daniels, when he is a good player, is a phenomenal, fantastic player. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that this year. And why that's happening, I don't entirely know. But the point being, right now, KU's best offensive player is Devin Neal. And you could argue the second best player is Daniel Highshaw. I don't know. Maybe you'd argue one of the offensive linemen. Maybe you'd argue one of the receivers, like if there's just different situations. But, like, I think that needs to be the biggest case. And the fact that you went from Kotelnicki to Grimes, so far the early returns have not been good, and it has been a notable drop-off. And even though Penn State just had a close game with like Bowling Green this past week, they still put up 34 points. You look at some of the yardage totals, they were doing good things. Drew Aller had a 98 QBR in the game against West Virginia. Go watch Drew Aller from year one as a freshman, albeit it was a freshman season. I know you look at the stats, he had like 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, something like that. But you look at the big games, he's going like 10 of 22 for like 90 yards. Like seriously. You look at what Andy Kotelnicki did for Drew Aller, and you look at Jalon Daniels struggling on Saturday against Illinois. It's hard not to see like, oh, okay, Drew Aller was not very good in big games and big moments last year. Jalon Daniels, when we have seen him, has been really good the past couple of years. Now those are flipped. It's kind of the common denominator there. So again, it is early in the tenure, and you hope that Jeff Grimes can kind of figure it out. But on paper right now, it feels like that was a big hit to KU, losing Andy Kotelnicki and going to Jeff Grimes. And who knows, maybe if you would have been able to hire Matt Lubick, because Matt Lubick is doing really good things at Nevada. I mean, that was the Nevada team that won 2 games a year ago, and they've been much, much, much more competitive this year. But I don't know that KU had the opportunity to really make him the offensive coordinator, because I know he was battling some, health things off the field, which, I mean, that's just kind of unfortunate part of life that kind of came up through this process for KU. But it does make you wonder with some of that stuff, what would have happened if that stuff wasn't kind of happening. Okay, let's get to our final takeaway here, and then we'll get to the top PFF performers on Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode today is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. I need one for today, tomorrow, the rest of the week. I feel like I'm going to be dragging all week long because of having to watch that thing on Saturday, and, watching a full day slate of football on Sunday, at least the Chiefs one on Thursday. But, if you need a little energy boost like I'm this week, whether it's watching sports, whether it's just trying to get through the work week, grab a 5 Hour Energy shot, stay alert, watch all your favorite games, do all your tasks at work. If you stayed up late to watch an intense overtime game, maybe you're watching that Boise State Oregon game, take a 5 Hour Energy shot in the morning so you can start your day with zero sugar and a convenient portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack with flavors like watermelon, tropical burst, grape berry, and there's flavor for pretty much everyone. So you choose the flavors delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order, cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. All right, continuing on with Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget to make Locked On College Football your second listen today. They will probably have a lot of glowing things to say about UNLV coming into this matchup, deservedly so. So that'll be a tough one for KU. All right, our third and final takeaway here. That game, the UNLV game, and honestly, I want to stretch this out to the next 2 games. Versus UNLV at West Virginia. This is going to determine the direction of what the goals should be for KU. Because let's say you lose both games. You lose to UNLV and you lose to West Virginia. At that point, you're sitting at 1-3. The goal changes to, can you salvage this season and get to bowl eligibility? Can you get to 6-6 on the season? And there's certain games we're gonna rank the 10 games that KU has in terms of easiest to hardest on tomorrow's episode. There's some games that have gotten harder. Think of like Arizona State. There's some games that have maybe gotten a little bit easier on there. You think of like maybe Colorado, maybe by that point late in the season, guys are just going to be like, I'm opting out, I'm going to the draft. I don't know, because that didn't look good against Nebraska. But point being, you do that, all of a sudden the goals very much change from where they were at the start of the season. If you go 1-1 these next 2, right? You beat UNLV, but then you lose at West Virginia, it's going to kind of feel like you're in the same spot where you are now, where it's like, okay, the goal is still probably just like make a bowl, but maybe the goal is more like 7-5 and just try to beat K-State. And then if you win both games with UNLV and West Virginia, and I don't even think it really cares how you do it. If you beat UNLV by a field goal, you beat West Virginia by a field goal, and yes, I guess it would matter a little bit. Like if you win both games 17-14, like it'd be great that the defense looked like that, but that would probably not read well to like what the passing game has changed in terms of what you're hoping from the Illinois game. But like point being, you win these next 2 games, it's going to feel more like the Illinois game is kind of that blip on the radar, that if you win these next 2 games, we can point to the Illinois game and say, okay, that was the anomaly. They had some weird stuff happen, weird stuff go against them. You had the picked up pass interference call. You had the punt that got muffed that turns into a touchback, which is the dumbest rule in college football. It's the right way they use the rule in the right way. That's what it was supposed to be. It's just the dumbest rule that it is in there in college football. Like that should have been a safety if we're having common sense and writing the rules. So you think of like weird stuff like that happening. You think about Illinois making some unbelievable plays on some like third down, third and longs where they had like 3rd and 8, 3rd and 12, where they're hitting a deep ball or hitting a guy on the sideline where they just made some unbelievable plays against KU's corners, which I was looking at Pro Football Focus. KU's top 10 in coverage grade right now through a couple of weeks of the season. They just made some of those plays. You had some bad turnovers. Like, you win these next 2 games, we'll be able to point to the Illinois game with more data under it and say, okay, that was the anomaly. Problem is right now we only have 2 games under our belt and only 1 against an FBS opponent. And so it's hard to be like, that's an anomaly because that's the biggest piece of evidence we have. So it almost, these next 2 weeks become the fork in the road moment of what are you? Is that the real, like, will the real Kansas Jayhawks please stand up, right? Or is that the real Kansas Jayhawks? So the goals and what they should be. Do you think this team can still contend for a Big 12 title? Do you think this team can still try to win 9 regular season games and try to win a 10th in a bowl game? Do you think they could try to win 8 games? Whatever you think the goals are, for me, I'm not going to fully evaluate what those should be. Once again, I mean, we had the goals in the preseason. I'm not going to reset them until these next 2 games happen, because they are going to tell us what exactly they should be for KU moving forward. All right, let's finish up. Top PFF performers against Illinois, bottom PFF performers as well. Some interesting notes from that on Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode today is brought to you by Ibotta. It's summertime and getting closer to fall, which means it's still barbecue season. And, you might be wanting to pull the TV outside, maybe barbecue up, or maybe just barbecue outside before the big game or something like that. Well, stock up on all your grilling favorites and earn cash back on every purchase when you use Ibotta. So you won't have to choose between burgers or hot dogs. You can get both. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores. Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE when you register. Just go to the App Store, Google Play Store, and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That is Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store today. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. We'll have a episode ranking the 10 remaining games for KU on tomorrow's episode of the show. Also get a little bit into what happened in the bowl game as a reminder for this weekend's UNLV for what takeaways that's going to possibly have. We'll get into our UNLV preview later in the week and plenty more content to come on Locked On Jayhawks this week. So make sure you subscribe to the show. All right, top 5 offensive PFF performers for KU. Number 1 was Logan Brown. He had an 82.6. He had a good PFF score in week 1 as well. So, piling that up with each other, I think that's a good time. And that's the weirdest part. I saw Jesse Newell, Kansas City Star. He now is the Chiefs beat writer, but he put this out on Twitter, and I thought it was very succinctly put. I'm paraphrasing here, but he kind of talked about how, like, for so long, Kansas had to try to figure out ways to overcome a disadvantage in the trenches, right? They weren't deep enough, they weren't big enough, or weren't good enough at offensive line and or defensive line. And they had to figure out ways to overcome that. And now in this game against Illinois, Kansas had the better offensive and defensive line. Like, they were good in the trenches. They ran the ball really well. They shut down the run really well. They got pressure on the quarterback, and they found ways to lose the game as kind of the opposite of other way. But Logan Brown, really good. Devin Neal, not a shocker there, 78.6 on the PFF grade. Michael Ford, always talk about how he's one of the most underrated guards in the country. 76.8 PFF grade. He was great for KU. Kobe Baines, how about this at the right guard spot? 74.6 PFF grade for him. And he had a 76 in terms of run blocking. Brown was kind of balanced between the two. Ford had a better pass block grade, but still was in the mid-70s in terms of run blocking. Baines is a good mauler as a blocker. He still had a 70 pass block, but almost a 76 run block. So, I mean, you're getting 3 of your top 5 are linemen, and the other one in your top 4 is a running back. What do you think you should do more? Run the football. Your 5th one is Luke Grimm, who had a 74 offensive grade, and had himself a nice game. It did feel like, though, the KU receivers weren't getting as much separation as we're used to, but I think part of that was Illinois did some good job. They talked about this in postgame, disguising coverages and stuff like that. And I don't know. There were some plays where they did get behind the defense, but the throw was just kind of underthrown a little bit there. As far as the bottom 5 offensive performers, Jalon Daniels was low man on the totem pole, 47.4 PFF grade. I think that one's kind of self-explanatory what happened, and we talked a lot about it in the postgame show. So make sure to catch that if you haven't. Thank you if you already did, and you're an everydayer. Other bottom 5, Quentin Skinner, just wasn't able to really get open, got dinged for that, didn't have a good run block grade. Jared Casey was up there at the bottom. Definitely felt like Jared Casey was this, for so many games for KU, has been this key blocker. He's always springing big blocks. He's always reliable for you. And this game, he made a couple big mistakes in this one. So it was a tough one for him. I do expect him to bounce back. Trevor Wilson was also in the bottom 5, only 10 snaps though. Trevor Cardell also in the bottom 5, and he only had 13 snaps. So tough to say too much there, but I think it does ring well in the same way that I would say, okay, well, 4 of the top 5 were related to the running game for KU. 2 of the bottom 5 for KU are tight ends. And that's something we talked about earlier in the show. Like, you just haven't had the same production so far from the tight end group. I had somebody, apologies, I'm forgetting who replied to me. So I'm so sorry about this, that was a big deal. I'll try to give you a shout out on the next episode. Anyway, when you're looking at like snap counts though, things of note, I don't know, maybe that Cardell only got 13 snaps. Like, it felt like this was going to be the year that he finally stepped up. I was also curious, Leighton Cure, who I thought played really well in the FCS game, only 5 snaps in this game. Again, goes back to the idea that, like, what's going on with the tight ends and the tight end usage. He actually had a 72 PFF grade, but didn't lead to a ton more playing time. Now, what about the defensive side of the football for KU in this one? Your top 5, Tommy Dunn had a 79 grade, and he really flashed a lot of plays. That's something we talked a little bit about on Saturday's episode. JB Brown, who's really good against the run, 78 overall on defense, 80 tackle grade, a little lower in coverage, but still was basically average in coverage. So that's fine from a linebacker. You look at his biggest strength being that. Mason Ellis, only 8 snaps, but a 72 PFF grade. I've kind of been surprised he hasn't been getting more playing time after he was talked up a good amount during camp. And it's felt like there have been some mistakes made by some of the Dye brothers at times. But Jalen Dye did have a really good game. He had a better game than the FCS game. 70 PFF grade. He was 4th on here in 26 snaps. And then Keenan Caldwell was tied with him, over 70 PFF grade, but just 10 snaps for Keenan Caldwell. Like Kobe Bryant, OJ Burrows, Marvin Grant, they were like right on the fringe. Taiwan Berryhill had himself a good game in 22 snaps. Cornell Wheeler had a solid grade as well. When you're looking at the bottom 5, though, DJ Withers, I was surprised to see that. I noticed Withers on a couple plays that he was solid at, but he was only graded a 38. Alex Reich was only graded a 40, only 3 snaps. You miss 1 tackle in 3 snaps. That's going to kind of kill your grade. DJ Warner was in the bottom 5 here at 4th. I'm skipping the guy in 3rd for a reason, because I want to talk about it for a second. I thought he had a good start to the game, but again, he's going to get better as the season goes on. And then Caleb Taylor, also bottom 5 at a 54. But again, I thought the D-line did a good job in this game, getting pressure and stopping the run. So I don't know if I totally agree with those. The one that I skipped over here, he only played 6 snaps, was Demarius McGee. So Demarius McGee only played 6 snaps. He graded a 44 on Pro Football Focus because he only had a 45 coverage grade. He was only targeted 2 times. So like, that's a small sample where it's like, okay, if one of the 2 falls incomplete or is overthrown, all of a sudden his grade is much different. But the problem is the 2 completions that he gave up went for 54 yards. He gave up a 42-yarder. He gave up another 12-yarder. I want to say both were on 3rd downs or on key plays. The thing that got me, now it's such a small snap number that it's like, it's so small, but like the fact that they targeted him twice on key plays when he was only in there for that little of time almost tells me that they were like, oh, look, we got this thing to happen. And you heard some of the stuff that Kobe Bryant was moving from, well, not moving, but he was going to play some on the outside, some on the inside, and wanted to learn that spot during fall camp. And understandably so, because that'll be something that I'm sure he'll be asked at certain times to play in the NFL. Here's the problem, though. I don't know that that's the best thing for KU. And you saw something like, if Kobe Bryant is the one matched up in those situations, do those get completed on Kobe Bryant? I don't know. I tend to lean toward probably not. Kobe is a little bit bigger. Demarius McGee is only like 5'9", so it's easier to kind of throw over him. I feel like McGee, who I still think McGee will be a good player. This is such a small sample of a weird thing. I'm just saying, like, I feel like McGee profiles more as being the slot corner, whereas Kobe profiles more as being the outside corner. So I didn't totally get that, and I thought it hurt KU on a couple of plays, but who knows? Maybe just a small sample and something that'll get fixed and corrected over the long haul of the season. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. More to come later this week as KU prepares for UNLV, trying to bounce back. Make sure you subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcast. See you next time with LOJ.